Welcome to Wednesday Evening Encore. Welcome to Wednesday Evening Encore. My name is Christopher D. Thomas, and this is the last Wednesday of 2025. And it happens to be, we can also host this last episode. Wednesday on a Wednesday happens to be the last day of the year of 2025. So, for those of you who don't know, this is day number one of my 3-day fast. So I'm almost 24 hours in, and this has been the concoction. It is a mixture of so that I could get my nutrients. You just don't want to drink water when you're on a fast, right? So you want to keep your nutrients, into your body. Except there's a very strategic way about how you want to do that. So this is um, turmeric, ginger, celery, cayenne pepper, honey, grapefruit. Grapefruit was the one that I missed. Grapefruit, along with spring water. Pull all of that into a pot. Got it to a boil. Took out all the nutrients, from that, and drained it. Um, and made several gallons, of these. And so this is my diet for the next almost 48 hours. So we're excited. So let's get down to Wednesday Evening Encore, right? So earlier today, I spoke to something that many of you recognize without naming. And not the visible effort, not the outcomes, yet something quieter. And this particular episode is not a continuation in the sense of adding more, yet it is a continuation in a sense of staying. Now, you may be saying, Chris, what the heck are you talking about? Beneath or underneath what we touched on this morning, there's a tension that does not resolve with insight. A tension between what you carried in 2025 and what the world had language for. Between responsibility that actually expanded and recognition that did not. So, on this last evening of the year, that tension is actually still here. Not asking to be fixed, just asking not to be rushed. There is a particular kind of leadership that does not announce itself. It does not escalate. It does not perform strain. It does not ask to be witness while it is happening. It often shows up as containment, as a silence where reaction would have been easier. As it shows up as restraint, where expression would have just been, could have been justified. And so many leaders learn early how to hold on to outcomes, yet fewer are actually prepared for what it costs to hold ambiguity. Now, what I've noticed, especially earlier near the end of this year, is not exhaustion from doing too much. It is the fatigue from holding what could not be spoken without consequence. Now, decisions that you made that had no clean explanation, misalignment that could not have been addressed without destabilizing others, progress that required patience instead of momentum. Now, this kind of leadership, this kind of leadership we're talking about, it rarely feels heroic while it's happening. Actually, it feels private. Sometimes it even feels isolating. Sometimes it even feels disoriented. And because there's no visible crisis, no obvious failures, it often goes unnamed, even by the one that's carrying it all. Now, but not because, it lacks significance, but because significance does not always create noise. I'm going to let that set in. Significance does not always create noise. Now, this is a moment where leaders encounter where they realize they are no longer managing tasks, their teams, or timelines. They are managing the weight of unsolved things. Now, what are some unsolved things? Things that couldn't be hurried. Things that could not have been delegated. Things that cannot be explained without losing their integrity. And the weight of it all. The weight doesn't show up on calendars. It doesn't show up on your reports. Yet it shapes your posture. It shapes your attention. And it's going to shape how the year closes out. That's the power of the weight. I want to interrupt the momentum of listening with one single question. What did you hold this year that required you to stay quiet longer than felt natural? Let me ask that question again. What did you hold this year that required you to stay quiet longer than felt natural? Now, as I sit here, what I'm noticing is that, and I can feel and know that there are no answers to that. What I'm noticing is stillness as that question resonate. Now, I am noticing a particular kind of listening that only shows up when people recognize themselves without needing to respond. Now, because I can say that because I've asked that question over the past 90 days, and that's the response that I receive. I am also noticing how often leaders mistake the absence of applause for the absence of impact. How often strength is confused with visibility. How often alignment is delayed because it does not arrive with certainty. Now, this is a shared pattern that's in rooms like these, especially we're talking to our leaders. Now, we're talking to our leaders. That's all we're talking to. We're talking to leaders. There's a shared pattern in rooms like this where leaders are. Not agreement, not sameness, but a recognition of weight that's carried without ceremony, of seasons that navigate without markers, of leadership that matured in ways that not translated to language yet. Now, I'm not here to interrupt that for you, only to name that it exists. So, this episode, this episode of Wednesday Evening Encore does not close with clarity. It closes with responsibility. And not the responsibility to do more, but the responsibility to be honest with what has already been carried. Now, you do not need to explain it tonight. You do not need to justify it. But you do need to acknowledge that it was real. And some things are not resolved at the end of a year. They are simply recognized.